having been to the darkest parts of your souls and come out to a light. And in coming out, have been able to help so many others. It's extraordinary. And some of it you can't explain.
And it's by that interconnectedness between human beings, just like nature, that we're able to help one another heal. It's impossible to do it alone. The elders say you cannot do it alone. You must have the other human beings to help you.
This is a family that I've been privileged to be part of. And it was an overwhelming sense of being with brothers and sisters and teachers and people that are there for each other in ways that I think are just really what the essence of humanity is about.
What is the healing power of recovery? The gift of recovery is that I have experienced receiving a gift and therefore can begin to give a true gift to other people. And then one person gives it to another, gives it to another, gives it to another. Then the next thing you know, families change, work environments change, communities change. So in recovery, I call up my brother and I say, this is what happened. This is who I was. This is who I'm trying to be. And what can I do to make amends to you for not being there as a sister, for fighting with you, for arguing with you, for not being present and available for you. And he goes, I'm just glad you're back. When that kind of healing that has gone on for 25 years happens between two people, that is extraordinary. An individual gets into recovery, but that healing process spreads from the individual to all of the people that they touch.
When a person engages in their own recovery process, I believe that healing needs to take place. And that healing begins on a very personal level. It begins on a level of healing one's body, healing one's emotions, healing one's spiritual self. And there's a lot of supports, information that are necessary for that process to begin. A lot of it has to do with forgiving oneself as well, and an understanding of what that means and how to go about that. And again, that often happens because people tell us about their own experiences and how it's worked for them and how it may work for us. As a result of learning to take care of oneself in a healthier way as part of the recovery process, over time, one's energy begins to expand, and it expands outward. I believe it expands outward into the family, for example.
I can remember the first Thanksgiving, and it's something that I need to talk about because it really, really opened my eyes up that, all of us sat at the table and my mother was just sitting there crying, and she was crying because she's seen all her sons finally sitting together, talking to each other, not at each other, and having a wonderful time, without drinking and drugging, because it seemed like on the holidays or whatever occasion, somebody get drunk or whatever and start cutting the fool. And she just was crying with so much joy. And, we said our prayer, we blessed the table and stuff, and she thanked the Lord for, bringing her sons, her sons. And I have 3 other brothers, like I said, and all of us are in recovery, and that's a blessing, We were real close at a young age, but drugs and alcohol definitely separated us. But the 12-step program and the healing power of recovery has brought us back together.
There's this sort of common knowledge out there that an addict or alcoholic negatively impacts 4 or 5 or 6 people. And the reverse is also true, that as a recovering person, it's not just that I heal myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all of those things, but that my recovery goes outward, heals my family, and outward from there to the community, helps healing the community, because alcohol and drug problems have such a huge impact on community.
I was introduced to a 12-step fellowship myself after getting out of a treatment facility, and I had met Tony. I remember coming into the fellowship very, very scared, not knowing anybody, because all I knew of life since I was 12 years old was people who used drugs. If you didn't use drugs, you weren't going to be a part of my life. And that's a sad thing, but it's the truth. And I met Tony in 1998, and I remember he was speaking in a meeting, and it felt like he was telling my story. And ever since then, I swore that I was never get involved in a relationship before, because through my active addiction, I had been raped. I have been physically and mentally abused by men, and I swore to myself that this was it. My higher power at that point wasn't in yet. I didn't believe in a higher power. And when I met Tony in 1998, it was a beautiful process. We are now engaged. We're both walking this journey together. We both go to church. I had no clue that I was going to be where I'm at today. And I'm just proud to be on this process with him and this spiritual journey with him. And I love him with all my heart. And my children love him with all their heart too. Recovery is the best thing that has ever happened to me.
The kind of person that I am today as compared to the kind of person I was in active addiction, it's night and day, Jim. My fiance will be the first to tell you that the behaviors that she witnesses and the changes that she has seen in me are incredible. In fact, I spoke at a meeting last night and she raised her hand and shared about how privileged and how wonderful that it was to have me in her life. And to hear somebody say that and to know that I'm being the kind of person that is welcomed into somebody's heart, it's just, it's a wonderful thing. She has 2 children that I love as they were my own. And I will do anything for this woman, and I believe that she would do anything for me. And that would not have happened if I hadn't dedicated my life into wanting to be a better person than I was before I got into here. And without recovery, there is no marriage. I'm married to a bag of dope, and it's such a different and wonderful, beautiful thing that, you know, we both worship together. We love each other like I've never been loved before, and that is a total testament of how powerful this recovery process is.
Most persons in recovery recognize that they are alive today because there were other people there willing to help them as they were struggling with their active addictions. And so we're told as we engage in the recovery process, many of us anyway, that how this works, that is to stay in recovery, is a willingness to give something back. There's also the value of a person in recovery who's willing to share his or her experience with their addictions and their recovery process. And one way for this process to happen is for them to be exposed to information, and that information coming from people in recovery who have stepped forward, who are visible in society, who are there to say, I too have this disease. I've accessed supports, help, treatment in order to make changes in my personal life. And I can share with you now what it's like to be in recovery and to be in sustained recovery. And I think that's something that we really do need to step forward and be willing to do.
The question of anonymity is a very important one in terms of the new recovery advocacy movement, because we obviously have lots of people from 12-step movements who are part of that movement, although that movement is not by any means exclusively individuals in 12-step recovery. If you look historically, anonymity was really designed to do 3 things. It was to protect the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Secondly, it was to protect the individual member from the stigma in this culture of being identified as alcoholic or addicted. And third, it served as a spiritual exercise. What the new recovery advocacy movement is doing is not asking people to violate that tradition, those traditions. But we are saying that there's a distinction between declaring one's affiliation with AA at the level of press, which is a clear violation of traditions, versus talking about one's recovery experience. When people come out to these events, they are not there as AA members. When they are speaking to the press and speaking to the public, they're not speaking as an AA or an NA member or an Al-Anon member. They are speaking as persons and families in recovery.
Well, I think about when I first got into recovery and the state that I was in, and incapable of being really a decent husband or a decent father. And through the gift of recovery and the healing power of recovery, I have a family around me today that they look to me for leadership, love, guidance, all those things that are so special to children and to my wife. And I am just almost overcome with emotion when I think that the healing that has happened to me is now reflected in my family. It's an amazing process, and I am so almost overcome with joy to see the children playing and my wife, Sandy, laughing with the children, and to know that I have a solid marriage today, that we can count on each other. My children can look to me and depend on me, and it's not a responsibility I take lightly. As a matter of fact, it's probably one of my greatest joys.
I today am a licensed clinical social worker, and I own my own home today, and I have wonderful friends and family, and I have gifts beyond my wildest dreams as a result of being clean and sober. And you know what? I'll stand up and tell that to anyone today, because I am proud to be in recovery. I'm alive because I'm in recovery. If it weren't for my 18 years of recovery, I surely would have died. Recovery from alcoholism and drug dependency is a gift.
Because in working to overcome stigma and the shame, that is also very empowering, and you get this resonance from the people who we see, and then it's like they're almost, I wouldn't say starved, but they want to hear it. They say, yes, great that you're doing this, how can I help? So, people are stepping out, and it's not longer, a closet thing, hiding, but, the fear kind of dissipates, the shame isn't there, and people are beginning to say, yes, I can step out too, it's okay. And I think this all relates to then healing, and, then you can carry the message to people who are still suffering or struggling, and they can know that, yeah, I don't need to be ashamed, I don't need to be embarrassed, I can get help, this can happen to me as well. It's a message of hope.
Probably one of the most significant figures in the history of alcoholism treatment and recovery was Senator Harold Hughes. 2 years before he died, he was, I think, very eloquent in terms of his discussion of the impact of passing has on other people in the culture at large. He said, "We in recovery have been part of the problem. We have both accepted and perpetuated the stigma that kept us from getting help and that has killed millions of addiction disease victims." He says, "By hiding our recovery, we have sustained the most harmful myth about addiction disease, that it is hopeless. And without the examples of recovering people, it's easy for the public to continue to think that victims of addiction disease are moral degenerates, and that those who recover are the morally enlightened exceptions. We are the lucky ones. We are the ones who got well, and it is our responsibility to change the terms of the debate for the sake of those who still suffer."
And I can remember just bawling and just crying because I knew that there was hope for me, And like I said, I started hearing speakers, but also I started listening to the counselors and the social workers, but most importantly, the people who came back from treatment who were currently in there, and they kept coming back, and they started talking about they had 6 months clean, they had a year clean, and then I started hearing people talk about 5 and 10 years clean.
There is nothing, not even money, that's more of an impediment to people getting care in this state than stigma. It is the stigma associated with alcoholism, drug abuse, psychiatric disabilities, which is a major force in people not standing up and saying, I need care, help me. You must be a voice. We hear you talk about being a face of recovery. You have to be a voice. You have to be a force. You have to be a face so that people understand throughout this state, not just legislators, that investing in services for people such as yourself are a good investment. We can have people such as you've heard today talk clearly, eloquently, in great articulation about the importance of investing in these services. But each of these legislatures, they have to hear from people in their community, the ones that are not even here today. They have to hear from people in their community. Senator so-and-so, I want you to do this. Representative so-and-so, this is important to me. There are still too many people under bridges as Mickey was. There's still too many mothers like Georgette who lost their son or their children to an overdose. There are still too many people who have been in prison, are in prison now, or going to prison because of the issues related to alcohol and drug abuse.
I get to go around and I talk to and meet with folks in recovery all over America. Consistently, the experience is being welcomed with open arms and welcoming with open arms. You know, it's that reciprocation of human emotion and feeling and the honesty that as I was saying some this morning, that something happened in America where it became not okay to be talking about love and compassion and caring, and that we were supposed to do something else. But what I find in the recovery community is an incredible honesty around what's in the heart and the beauty that goes with that. And for me, every time I experience it, it's like an overpowering blessing. There's no other way to describe it.
I think that honesty, compassion, integrity were always there. What happened when we got engaged in the addiction process, became addicted, we became morally bankrupt. We lost those things because we had to survive. We had become dependent on a substance that had control over our own lives. Putting down the substance of choice is the first thing you do. We bring back all of those excellent qualities that we had before. We didn't have to learn them. We lost them because we were so distracted by this demon rum, as it's called sometimes. We were so distracted by and so consumed by our addiction, and so powerless over our addiction that became the focus of who we were at that time. In recovery, all those things emerge because you're no longer sedating yourself. You're no longer using alcohol and other drugs in a way that robs you of feelings, robs you of emotions. And the process of recovery requires that, requires integrity, requires honesty.
It took me a couple knocks to get to my knees and say, God, I don't want this. Help me get honest. And that HOW, if you will, the honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. So I had to be honest first with me, then I could be honest with you, and open-minded for any help that was offered to me, and be willing to do the work. And it was really hard work. So it all starts with being honest with myself.
I always wanted to change. I truly believe today that my biggest enemy is not the disease. You know what I mean? It's the loss of hope and despair. When I had the application, they told me your job history, your education, and the education part was, I have none. Simple as that. History, crime, yeah, I'm a convicted felon. Job history, well, what I'm gonna put there if I never in my life had a job? I remember they told me, come on, they need a dishwasher. I got dressed, I went over there. The next thing you know, my desire, you know, my passion started growing up. For the first time I opened a bank account. For the first time I paid bills, I paid rent. I've been 2 years, I'm promoted to prep supervisor, teaching supervisor, you know what I mean? And they're giving it to me, you know, because I earned it. You know, I've been absent one day, and that's just a miracle, man. I'm planning to buy a house in this town. I'm planning to get married pretty soon. I've been drug-free for 6 years, and that's a miracle. I ain't cursing nobody, that's a miracle. I ain't fight with nobody, that's a miracle. I didn't disrespect nobody, that's also a miracle for me.
One of the things we found helped us a lot in the healing of Native communities is we took these 12 steps to a group of elders one time. And at the time where we were in our growth, we were calling this a white man's program. We explained to them the best that we could what each of those steps meant. And then they come back to us and they said, no, they said, that's not really a white man's way. They said, that's our way also. And then how they explained it to us is that there was a natural order. So to grow or change, it's sort of like we look at things in 4 directions. So how they would explain the 4 directions on that is like recognize, acknowledge, forgive, and change. And that's a whole circle of healing. So then we were able to take the steps and put them in a circle. So we put steps 1, 2, 3 in the east. That's like the new sun, new day, new beginning. Then that's the direction about finding your higher power or creator, God, whatever you call it. And then 4, 5, 6 in the south, where you do the inventory. So that's where you find yourself, finally. Your strength and weaknesses, this is who I am. Then 7, 8, 9 we put in the west, and that's when you make your amends. So in our culture, it's very important to have relatives, to know your relationships. So when you make your amends, then you reestablish your circle. And then 10, 11, 12 in the north, and that's the elder's wisdom. That's your maintenance steps. It was our own delusions that it was a white man's program.
Under the rubric of recovery, we have Latinos, we have Afro-Americans, we have people on methadone, we have drug-free. We have all these different people, different religions, different ways of coming to the recovery. Some are 12 steps, some are there as a religious experience, some are there on their own. So this community of people, all knowing how the challenge of starting their recovery and maintaining their recovery, respect everyone else's ways of doing it. So you're really breaking down a lot of the barriers of our society within this group. Racial tensions go, the way they've got their recovery go, the way they receive their treatment goes, what their religious experiences goes. So whenever recovering people come together, there's this bond, and it's around integrity, it's around an honesty, it's around a commitment.
I definitely couldn't have done it without my higher power. I can say so many things about the higher power, but the most important thing I have to say is strength and guidance, you know. I got this job through volunteer services. My counselor that I had, she said, you know what, I have an opportunity for you that you would love working with these guys, you know, and I came for the interview, and when I came for the interview, it was like, wow, this is what I want to do, you know. And when I got to the house, it was like the guys welcomed me in, and also that I had the knowledge and the experience from using and also from staying clean myself, that I can pass that on to them. And so I try to show them by power of example, you know, that, you know, if I can stay clean and sober one day at a time, you can too. And I show them the way that I do it, you know, by going to my meetings and trusting in a higher power. Whatever one they choose to pick is up to them, you know, but just trusting in my higher power, you know, that I choose to call God. I get choked up when I start talking about that, and it's hard for me to explain, because at one time I had no faith. I had no faith. Drugs and alcohol had taken it away.
There's this saying that God does not shut one door without opening up another. And that is so true. I know that, but let me tell you, when one door shuts, that time before that other door opens, when you're in that hallway, is uncomfortable. And it is the hardest thing in the world to maintain your faith in that hallway. But working with other people in recovery and watching them go through the same healing process that I have gone through, that I know works, it keeps me grateful. And as long as I'm willing to wait that hallway out, man, that door always opens.
Faith is a belief that something will happen. It's unseen. Faith is almost our soul. It's an integral part of the healing process. It's a belief that you will get better. And you continue to believe that, and you do get better. Faith allows us to move negative thoughts and feelings out of the way and believe that we are positive, good, healthy human beings who deserve to have a good life. It's so vital. It's almost the core of this. Mm-hmm. Faith helps us believe. Faith helps us get through the next day in spite of adversity. Faith helps us address challenges. Faith allows us to move barriers out of the way. Faith allows us to ask for help. Faith allows us to surrender. Faith allows us to be humble. Faith gives us humility. It's vital to the healing process and the recovery process.
They were describing a person who happened to call the 12-step hotline in that community the weekend of the walk. And the person who responded to the call went and met with them and said, "Why don't we go someplace?" And they took this person who was about 21 years of age, had never virtually known anyone in recovery in his life. And they go to this walk and they reach a point where this young person sort of suddenly stops, and the person with them sort of looked to figure out what had caught their attention. And as they looked, what they saw was they were at a point in the march where all you could see was recovering people and their families as far as the eyes could see. The enormous healing power of what it meant when you saw that community of recovery, physically and spiritually, coming together at that moment in time was an amazing experience. I've often referred to this coming together as almost a kind of Lazarus Society. People who by all rights should have been dead in many cases, who have sort of risen from the grave to announce their presence and their health in this culture, and also their ability to serve other people in this process.
You have risen from the absolute depths of despair, of hopelessness. Nobody wanted you. You're a disgrace. You were thrown out. No one wanted to be around you. And somewhere in there was a glimmer of something that allowed you to reach down inside of yourself and find the courage just to say, yes. Didn't know what lay ahead, didn't know what was going to happen. You stepped out on faith.
So you see this interconnectedness between the tree and the water and the wind, and the tree cannot get the seeds to a new place without the wind and the water carrying it. It's about relationships. There's no way that I can be in recovery without you. We really need each other to heal.
One of the goals of recovery, of full recovery, when you've moved beyond sobriety, is to be able to make a shame-free presentation of self. To be able to really say, this is who I am. It's beyond pride, it's beyond shame, it's just who I am, and it's up to you to decide what to do about that, but that's who I am. That's more than healing. I mean, that's pure health.
I think number one, I think it's something that's within all of us, okay? And any human being ever created, it's part of them. When you make that change in your life, that profound thing that happens when you find recovery, it frees that experience to come forward. And it expresses itself in really, I think, re-seeking, re-finding, re-establishing, re-giving the love that you've missed for a period of time.